guys, Matt Allen here. Welcome back to Tactical Bassin. Today we are talking springtime lipless crankbaits. Gonna run through a variety of different baits, different applications, colors, etc. so that you guys are dialed in, because the lipless is hands down one of the best baits throughout the springtime. Now we've done, covering the gamut, throwing the spinnerbait, throwing the lipless, throwing a square bill, throwing all these different reaction baits in the springtime, throwing the A-rig. But in a lot of the country, there is just a magical lipless bite, that bait specifically. We talk a lot about throwing the LV500 out here, but when we go to different lakes, do different things, we throw some different baits. So right off the bat, let's start with color. And there's gonna be a lot in this video, so like all these videos, down in the video description, we'll link all the baits along with some color recommendations, the gear, everything. But colors, we try to keep it pretty simple, although we do definitely use a variety of colors. But your number one color in the springtime, if you're on that straight retrieve, cover in water, chuck and wind, is typically going to be some variety of red crankbait. If I can get this junk to fly away. Some variety of a red, whether that's an iridescent red like that Ruckus, or one like that Demiki, that Spot. Across the board, you can spend a ton of money on a lipless, you can spend 75 cents on a lipless, but get your colors right, and depending on the types of conditions you're in, that's going to dictate how much you want to spend on the baits themselves. But number one color, you're going red. Number two color, in my opinion, is something ghost. So something like that guy, that's an LV500. There's a Jackal, but just something in that ghost realm. Then after that, it's kind of a split for me. You're either going Chartreuse Shad or something white, or something with that chrome to it, like that guy, or that one. Something with a lot of chrome and a lot of flash. These are kind of a tie for me, though I use them at different times. And then last for me, personally, is Bluegill. That's the last one that I'm gonna make sure I represent. If you're typically a pond guy, Bluegill is gonna be your number one color. Instead of Craw. Craw would be number two. But for most guys out on the lakes, Craw is your number one place to start. Now, you have to understand that with lipless, I don't care if you're spending a couple bucks, or if you're going over to Japan and spending a pile of money, or somewhere in between. Each one of these baits has a purpose, and you need to understand what they're for. So I'm gonna run you through some of my favorites, just right down the line. This pile of baits that I put out here, some of my favorites. It's a full price range, and just explain what I use them for. This guy first is the Spot. Notice he doesn't have any hooks. That's because in the wintertime I store my baits without hooks so I don't rust out my entire box. So this guy hasn't quite come out for spring yet, but he will here shortly. It's a cotton cordell Spot, super cheap bait, very inexpensive in the world of lipless. $2, $3, $4, I don't remember. They're not expensive. This bait is ultra lightweight, very slow sink. It's got a good rattle to it, a ton of beads in it, so it has kind of a unique sound. Most importantly to me though, is that it's got that slow sink to it. This is not a bait I try and hop on bottom. It doesn't want to go to bottom. It's a mid-column bait, because even if you let it go to bottom, as soon as you start to work it, it rises up because it doesn't have a lot of weight in it. So this bait for me, that's a grass bait. If I'm fishing around grass beds, if there's a lot of vegetation, a lot of cover, and I'm trying to stay above it and just tick the tops, that's my bait. That is a killer springtime bait, and it is not expensive. Number two is gonna be the 2-tap. A lot of people like the red eye shad, and I do too, but this is the red eye shad 2-tap. A little bit different. It's got a tungsten knocker in there, a little bit different sound to it. Not a bunch of beads, just that one tungsten knocker in there. Kind of a mid-depth bait. You can fish it on the bottom, but again, personally, I still prefer it for that straight retrieve. Burning around cover, they're just a different sound. You want to figure out which one the fish are most interested in. But personally for me, I like that 2-tap more than I like the original red eye shad. But everybody's fish are different. You need to try it. That Demiki Body shape, it's right there with that 2-tap or with the red eye shad. But sound is a lighter sound. To me, just listening to it, I think it's got a lot more glass beads in it than metal beads. I could be wrong, I can't see inside this bait, but that has that glass bead sound to it. Just a good mid-range, again, burning bait. This one will run a little bit deeper than this one. It's a little deeper sound, but very, very similar. That's a good one, again, for burning around cover. We talked about this one recently. We did a review of that one. That's a Raid. Now that is an expensive bait. That's a Japanese bait. It's got one knocker in it, one deep, heavy knock. And that's all that's in there. That is just a, how do I describe where I use that? It's different. So if I'm on a lipless bite and I come around the corner and I discover that there's 6 other guys on my same lipless bite, go different. That's why that bait really matters to me. It's a good mid-depth bait. I can hop it on bottom. It sits up on its nose, which is very unique. There's only a handful of baits that are gonna do that well, but it'll sit perfectly on its nose on the bottom. So if I'm using that hopping, really slow method, it's primo for that, but I can also burn it. The LV500, of course, you guys know we love the LV. We've done dedicated videos specifically to how to work this bait. You can fish it mid-column. We do a lot of times we're just hopping it on bottom. Where it shines mid-column is when your fish are a little deeper. You know, if your fish are up in 2-3 foot on the bank, you send that cotton cordell spot up there. But if your fish are in 8-9 feet on the bank, you throw an LV. Because it's a heavier bait, it'll naturally run deeper at the same speed. So if you're trying to be on top of the grass bed, you throw a bait that runs well on top of the grass bed. If you're trying to fish the edge of the grass bed, or the deeper edge, or the outside of docks, go to something like an LV. It's gonna drop faster, it's gonna hold depth better, and it fishes well on bottom. That one's a River to Sea Ruckus. Kind of a mid-range sound, mid-range depth. I don't hop this bait on bottom. This is another mid-range retrieve for me. Not ultra shallow, not ultra deep. This is an interesting bait. The action is different. Most lipless have a really, really, really tight action. This one has a little wider wobble to it. The first time I threw it, I thought it was odd. That's my best word to describe it. I thought it was odd. But I caught a fish on it on like the 3rd cast. So I played with it some more, and the whole time I was fishing, I was going, man, I've just never felt a lipless like this. Another fish. So I've caught enough fish on it that now I just don't even worry about it. It has a unique action. It has more actual body roll than a typical lipless, but just gets bit. It's another unique one to try. And then last, 2 more. This evergreen, Japanese bait. You're gonna pay a little more for it, but it comes with premium hardware. It's got awesome hooks already on it, because you know we change all our hooks. I don't change these hooks. These are perfect out of the package. It's an awesome bait that sits well on bottom. It's got a unique sound to it. Very different than an LV500. There's the LV. There's the evergreen. Higher pitch, but they fish in that exact same category. Fish them down on bottom, fish them slow. I don't like this bait very much for a straight retrieve. I love it for bottom hopping. And then last is that Jackal, that TN70 Jackal. Mid-range sound, sits great on bottom. It's in that same category. Perfect bait for hopping, great bait for a straight retrieve. And we catch them just burning it. We catch them hopping bottom. Killer colors. Jackal has some really unique colors. It's right there with the LV500. The way they fish, very, very similar. Paint jobs, very, very similar. This one stands up better on the bottom. This one lays flat, but both fish extremely well, and you want to try both when you're on that bite. Rod, I throw them all on an 845 CBR. The model that we used to use was also an 845 CBR, but they discontinued that. So we picked up the IMX Pro to try it, and love it. They also make this in an E6X, so more budget friendly, and we'll link you all that. But if an IMX Pro is in your budget, I know a lot of guys have been asking for our thoughts on the IMX Pro. I love it. I absolutely love it. It's lighter than the rod we were using before. It's more responsive, but it's still that 845 action, which is a rod that just, I mean, it just loads up on them when you're working that lipless. You hit a big fish on a lipless. Guys talk all the time about how lipless have a horrible hookup to land ratio and they dump fish. I don't have that problem. I think it's a rod issue. I think guys are trying to throw it on the same rod that they throw a lot of other crankbaits on, and I'm not a fan. That particular rod, that 845, it loads so deep into the blank, you just don't horse them. You use quality hooks, and we've talked before about it, but basically you use an EWG hook if they're inhaling it. You use a round bend if they're just slapping at it. We'll link all that gear in the video description, but essentially put quality hooks on, use the right rod. Don't horse them. Use a rod that will just bow up on them, and then you just lean back and you just let them dig. Last year we showed that video of Tim catching one almost 11 pounds. It was on stock hooks, but he just let that fish dig and dig and dig. It took minutes to land it, but when it came up, he got it. If you get them on proper gear, lipless should not have that bad reputation. You should not be losing fish on them. They're a great bait. If you dial your gear properly, you'll put a lot of fish in the boat. Use both methods this spring. Do that bottom hopping that we talk about, as well as that burning. You are gonna put fish in the boat. Explore colors, explore some of the different baits, and you're gonna have fun. Hit that like button, subscribe to the channel. We'll talk to you soon.